to Buddha. Right, so within the class, if I give you a quick summary to what we discussed so far, right? So there are 6 contemporary teachers to Buddha, right? So we were discussing about their biography as well as their doctrines in detail, right? So at the very beginning, within the class, we discussed about the Makkaliputta Gosala, right? So the teacher, he was the teacher of the Ajivakas tradition, right? So in detail, we discussed about the Makkaliputta Gosala and we finished that. Actually, we don't have much to discuss about these doctrines, as we discussed about these 6 contemporary teachers in advance at the beginning also, right? So that's why I thought of giving you a kind of open book assignment, because it is not a thing that I should explain point by point. Once you read it and once you go through it, you can understand the lesson, right? So then within the open book assignment, I sent you the lecture notes about the Ajita Kesakambali, right? So Ajita Kesakambali, he was the proponent of the materialistic tradition or Lokayatas. And then last week, I sent you lecture notes regarding the Purna Kassapa and Pakuda Kachayana, right? So Purna Kassapa, his doctrine was Ahetuvadins, right? So their group was the Ahetuvadins, and Pakuda Kachayana, he was the doctrine is all about the externalists or the Sarvastivadins, right? So likewise, we finished discussing about we finished going through the lessons about about 4 great contemporary teachers, right? So, and I sent you some questions, and some of you answered those questions, and for the answers you have sent me last week, I could not go through. I will go through them as soon as possible and send you the feedback, so that, right? So the those who didn't answer the questions, please make sure to write the answers and send them to me, right? So today we are actually today also there's nothing to teach you point by point, because as we already talked about these 6 contemporary teachers, you can understand, you already know what their doctrines include, right? So but as I could not take your class for like 3 to 4 days, that is why I took the class tonight, right? So tonight I'm going to discuss about the Nigantanatha Putta and his doctrine, as well as the Sanjay Bellati Putta, right? So by discussing about those 2 teachers, this topic, almost all the contents of this topic will be finished, but there is some 2 points to discuss. Once I finish about talking the Nigantanatha Putta and the Sanjay Bellati Putta, during our next session, next lecture, I'm going to discuss about the Buddhism. Now, so far we discussed about the 6 contemporary teachers to Buddha and their doctrines, right? So the teachers who were there during the time of Buddha and their doctrines, right? So, and we need to learn about the Buddhism as well, the main concepts of the Buddhism. It is also a doctrine which was prevalent during the 6th century BCE, along with those 6 contemporary religions, right? So basically, our next topic will be the basic characteristics and points about the Buddhism, right? We will be discussing about the Buddhism, because so far we discussed about the other doctrines which were prevailed during the time of Buddha, right? So next topic will be about the Buddhism, right? So the basic characteristics and all. And after that, before we moving to the next main topic, and if you take the Buddhism and Jainism that we are going to talk about tonight, right? So the doctrine of the Nigantanatha Putta is Jainism, right? So if we talk about Buddhism and Jainism, are the 2 main religions still prevailing within India, basically, from those 6 contemporary religions, right? So Jainism also attracted many followers similar to the Buddhism, right? So, and it is also still prevailing in some parts of India, as well as some Jain temples we could find in other countries as well, right? So Buddhism and Jainism played a vital role within the 6th century BCE and even for now, right? So therefore, there are some, when we go through the Buddhism and Jainism, there are many similarities in between those two religions, as well as some dissimilarities, differences, right? So, and after we after the discussion of the Buddhism, our next topic will be, we will have a quick comparison, similarities and dissimilarities in between the Buddhism and Jainism, right? So once we finish that 2 topics, then we could move on to our next main topic, right? So that is all about a quick summary about what we discussed so far and what are our next topics to discuss, right? So tonight, as I told you earlier, Nigantanatha Putta, I'm going to discuss about Nigantanatha Putta and Sanjay Bellati Putta. It's very quick topic. We could go through it and finish it quickly, right? So as we learned about earlier, there were 6 contemporary teachers, right? So, and among those 6 religions which were prevailed during the time of Buddha, if we consider about present scenario, among those 6 religions, we could see only the Buddhism and Jainism are still prevailing among those 6 religions, right? So there may be other religions also, but basically, and if you take it as a majority, Buddhism and Jainism are still prevailing, right? So they are the 2 religions that survived up to now. Others were disappeared throughout the time. Other religions disappeared throughout the time, right? So when we talk about the Jainism, so the Nigantanatha Putta, he introduced his doctrine was Jainism. Actually, he was not the one who introduced the Jainism, right? So let's discuss about that point, right? So if we take the doctrine Jainism, we could find a term called Tirthankaras, right? So what do we mean by Tirthankaras, right? So according to the Jain doctrine, Tirthankara is an individual who conquered the samsara. According to the Jain religion, Tirthankara is an individual who conquered the samsara. Samsara is the cycle of rebirth and death, death and rebirth. And so Tirthankara is where an individual who conquered the samsara on their own, and not only that, they made a path for others to follow. They had followers as well. They help others to understand this specific religion, Jainism, right? So within the Jain religion, we could identify 24 Tirthankaras. Tirthankara was an individual who conquered the samsara and made a path for others to follow, right? So within the Jain religion, we could identify 24 Tirthankaras, the people who conquered the samsara, 24 people who conquered the samsara and made a path for others to follow, right? So the Nigantanatha Putta was the 24th Tirthankara within the Jain religion, right? He was the 24th Tirthankara within the Jain religion. So then who was the founder? Who was the proponent of this specific religion, right? So actually, Nigantanatha Putta was not the proponent, was not the founder of this religion. Rather, the founder of the Jainism, founder of this religion is a person called Rishabhanatha. Rishabhanatha was the founder of the religion, and Nigantanatha Putta was the 24th Tirthankara within the Jain doctrine, Jain religion, right? So Jainism could be identified as one of the oldest religions within the world, right? So, and during the time of the Buddha, Nigantanatha Putta was the leader of the Jainism. During the time, there were leaders before that, right? So there were leaders to the Jain religion before that. There were other Tirthankaras before the time of the Buddha, but within the time of the Buddha, Nigantanatha Putta was the leader to the Jain religion, and also we could say he was the 24th Tirthankara to the Jain religion, Jain doctrine, right? So within the Buddhist literature, if we take the Buddhist literature, now we could gain all these information through the Buddhist literature, right? So what is the sutta, which includes all the details about these contemporary teachers?
Samannaparasta.
Yes, very good. Samannapala Sutta, right? So there was a conversation in between Buddha and King Ajasatta, right, about these 6 contemporary teachers, right? Very good, right? So within this Buddhist literature, Nigantanatha Putta was identified by using several names, right? So if we take the teacher of the Ajivakas, Makkali Putta Gosala, when we're discussing about him, he was also identified or called using several names: Maskarin Putta Gosala, Gosala Makkari Putta, right? Likewise, he too had several names to identify within several books and literature, right? So similar here with for Nigantanatha Putta also, within the Buddhist literature, we could he also termed by using several identifications, right? So what are they? Lord Mahavira, Nigantanatha Putta, and Vardhamana. Lord Mahavira, Nigantanatha Putta, and Vardhamana, right? So those are these several names which were used to identify Nigantanatha Putta, right? So if you Google Google to learn about more about the Nigantanatha Putta, in most of the situations he was identified using the term Mahavira. Right, so Mahavira is also a very common name which was used to identify the Nigantanatha Putta. Right, so any name you could use, but from each and every name, it was used to identify the same person or Nigantanatha Putta. Right, so Nigantanatha Putta, if we take the name, Niganta means he claimed that he freed himself from all the bonds. He freed himself from all the bonds he had. Due to that reason, he was identified as Niganta. He freed himself from all the bonds. He renounced himself at the age of 30. We will be discussing later about that. Due to that fact, as he freed himself from all the bonds, due to that fact, the term or the name Niganta was given to him. Right? Then the Natha Putta, right? So Natha Putta is where he was the son of the Natha Putta. Natha Putta is his family name, right? So Niganta is where he claimed that because he freed himself from all the bonds. Due to that fact, the Niganta, this term was given to him, and Natha Putta was his family name. That is what why he was identified, or he was known as Niganta Natha Putta. Right, so it is believed that according to the Buddhist literature and available resources, it is believed that he was born before the Gautama Buddha. He was born before the Gautama Buddha, but during the 6th century BCE. Right, somewhere in 599 BC, before the birth of the Gautama Buddha. Right, so before he stepped into his religious life, he too had a lay life. He too had a household life. Right, so he was married and he had a daughter. Right, he had bonds during his he had bonds, and he had a successful lay life before he stepped into the religious life. right? He was married and he had a daughter, right? So, and at the age of 30, at the age of 30, he renounced everything. He gave up all his bonds and bonds as well as his material life, and he starting austerities, right? He gave up everything, he renounced everything, and then he started practicing austerities, and not normal austeric practices, rather he practiced severe austerities. He practiced like mortifications, right? He practiced severe austerities, right? So it is said that within the Buddhist literature, during his austeric practices, he neglected his body. He neglected his body and medicated for around period of 12 years, right? So period of, it's more of a mortification practices, right? More of a mortification practices. He entirely neglected his body and he medicated around 12 years. That 12-year period, not only that 12-year, throughout his time, that 12 years, he entirely neglected his body, and throughout his austeric practices, throughout his religious life, he practiced severe austerities. He practiced severe austerities, right? So the important fact, right? So important fact about the Nigantanatha Buddha, he believed in, apart from the other contemporary teachers, he believed in moral behavior. He believed in moral behavior and the good and bad effects of the good and bad moral actions, right? So Nigantanatha Buddha, unlike the other teachers, he believed in moral behavior, and he advocated and he believed in the good and bad effects of the good and bad moral actions, right? So he prioritized the moral behavior, right? He prioritized the moral behavior, right? So if we take the principle of karma, right? So within the Buddhist and Jain doctrines, we could identify a difference between the concept of karma, right? So within our next topic, we will be discussing, as I told you, our final topic to this main topic would be the comparison between Buddhism and Jainism, right? So in that topic also, we will be discussing this point in detail, right? For the time being, if we take the term karma, there are many more differences that we could identify within the that we could trace between the Buddhism and Jainism. Right? If we take the term karma, if we take the concept karma, there is a difference between the how the Jain tradition, Jain religion identify the karma, and how the Buddhist religion identify as the karma. Right. So if we consider about the Jain tradition, they consider all the actions. They consider all the actions, either voluntary or involuntary, as karma. Right? Within the Jain tradition, they consider all the actions, voluntary or involuntary, as karma. Right? But when it comes to the Buddhism, actions based on intention were considered as karma. Right? Actions based on intention, or chetana, we could say, were considered as karma based on chetana or intention. But when it comes to the Jainism, voluntary or involuntary, all the actions were considered as karma. Right? So that is a main difference that we could trace in between the Buddhism and Jainism, and we will be discussing more differences and similarities during the end of this main topic, right? So that is a main difference that we could identify within the Buddhism and Jainism, karma. So if we take the Jainism, all the voluntary and involuntary actions are considered as karma, and in Buddhism, only the actions based on intention or chetana are considered as karma. Right? So, and also another difference that we could trace, they considered within the Jain religion, they considered bodily actions are more severe than verbal and mental actions. bodily actions are more severe than verbal and mental actions, right? So when it comes to Buddhism, bodily actions, verbal actions, mental actions, if we do intentionally, all produce similar results, right? But within the Jain tradition, bodily actions were severe than the verbal and mental actions, right? So then what they did was, according to the Jain tradition, what they did was, in order to avoid, they wanted to, the followers of Jain tradition, they wanted to negate, or they wanted to burn all the bad karma, whatever they did during their past, right? So in order to burn those, or finalize those bad karma, what they did was, they uh, they did not make any new actions, right? So they did not make new karma, rather they wanted to burn all the previous bad karma, right? So for that purpose, they practice renunciation. They practice renunciation, and by practicing severe austeric practices, by practicing severe austerities, they believed that they could negate all the bad actions they have done so far, right? Hope you understood, right? So they wanted to, within the people or the followers who follow the Jain tradition, they wanted to burn all the bad karma they did during their previous births, and during the previously within this birth, right? So in order to burn those bad karma, they renounced themselves and they practiced severe austerities, and by practicing those mortifications and severe austerities, they believed that they could negate all the bad actions. They could burn all the bad karma that they have collected so far, right? So that is why they renounce themselves, and through inaction and renunciation, they try to burn all their bad karma. Through renunciation and inaction, they try to, through renunciation, through inaction, by practicing severe austeric practices such as mortification, they try to burn all the bad karmas they have collected so far, right? So that is the main reason they renounced, right? Right. So, and within the when we talk about the Jain tradition, during the 5th century BCE, there were a large number of followers to the Jain tradition. Even for today, it is still prevailing religion, right? So there were large number of followers to this specific religion, right? So because we could find some, the Niganthanatha Buddha advocated some observations for this specific religion, right? So for one's spiritual liberation, right? So those 5 characteristics, or those 5 observations, which they are really important and sound interesting. That is why they had a large number of followers, right? So now let's look at what are those observations which were advocated by the Niganthanatha Buddha for one's spiritual liberation. There are 5 things. The first one is non-violence. Non-violence. It is also there within the Buddhist religion, Buddhism as well. Non-violence, right? So non-violence is a main characteristic that they could attract more followers, right? So because we discuss this again and again, when it comes to the 6th century BCE, there were many dissimilarities within the society, right? So the society was layered, right? And there the violence was there, right? So due to this fact, non-violence played a huge role to attract more followers to the religion, right? So the Niganthanatha Buddha within the Jain religion, Niganthanatha Buddha was also advocated this major characteristic, non-violence, or else we could identify it as ahimsa, right? Within the Buddhism also, this is one of the major characteristic we could identify, non-violence, truth, satya. Within the Buddhism also, we could trace this fact, right? Non-violence, truth, non-stealing, chastity, and non-attachment, right? So those are 5 main observations which were adopted by the Nigantanatha Buddha for one's liberation, right? So what are they? Non-violence, truth, non-stealing, chastity, and non-attachment, right? So those are 5 main observations. You have to remember those 5 with the observations within the Jain doctrine, which were advocated by the Nigantanatha Buddha for one's spiritual liberation, right? Right. So, and now let's come to the Samannapala Sutta, right? So according to the Samannapala Sutta, Nigantanatha Buddha was the 5th heretic teacher referred by the king Ajasatta, right? The king Ajasatta talked about the Nigantanatha Buddha. He was the number 5 within his questions to the Buddha, right? And during this conversation within the Samannapala Sutta, King Ajasatta stated Buddha that he visited this teacher here. King Ajasatta visited Nigantanatha Buddha once, and he asked a question about the present advantages of the life of a recluse, right? So once King Ajasatta visited the Nigantanatha Buddha, King Ajasatta made a question to the Nigantanatha Buddha, and his question was what are the present advantages of the life of a recluse. But instead, what happened was, instead of answering the question which was produced by the King Ajasatta, the Nigantanatha Buddha answered or expounded his answer for another question, right? So he answered or expounded about the 4-fold restraints of Nigantanatha Buddha, right? So he did not answer to what King Ajasatta asked, rather he expounded about the 4-fold restraints within the Jain tradition, right? So, and during the conversation of Buddha, King Ajasatta mentioned that it was like asking a question about a mango tree and giving an answer about a jackfruit tree, right? Because he gave an completely different answer for the question which was asked by the King Ajasatta, right? Right. So if we take look at the 4-fold restraints introduced by Nigantanatha Buddha, he restrained all the regards of water. He restrains regards of evil. All evil has he washed away, and he lives suffused with the sense of evil held at bay, right? So those are the 4-fold restraints which were introduced by the Nigantanatha Buddha. But within the Samannapala Sutta, the meaning of the 4-fold restraints are not clear, right? So even though within his doctrine he has mentioned about the 4-fold restraints to the doctrine of the Jainism, those restraints, 4 restraints are not clear, right? Those restraints are not clear, right? And also Nigantanatha Buddha could be identified as a naked ascetic, right? He was a naked ascetic. Nigantanatha Buddha was famous for, he was naked, and he was famous for a naked ascetic, right? And it is believed that he died when he was 72 years old. He died when he was 72 years old due to self-starvation, due to his mortification practices, due to severe austeric practices which were followed by him, right? And there was his close follower called Upali, and later on he became a disciple of Lord Buddha. There was a his close follower called Upali, and later on he became a disciple of Lord Buddha, right? So, and it should noted that when we go through now, so far we discussed about the details which were included within the Buddhist literature about the Nigantanatha Putta, right? So, but if you go through the Jain tradition, the Nigantanatha Putta has may have some two different accounts, right? So you should note that Buddhist and Jain literature of Nigantanatha Putta hold two different accounts, right? So that is all about the Nigantanatha Putta, right? So Nigantanatha Putta, Jain tradition, right? So far we discussed about his severe austeric practices. Earlier he had a successful lay life, he had bonds. Then at the age of 30, he renounced everything and he started practicing severe austerity, right? So the doctrine he introduced, so he was the 24th Tirthankara to the Jain religion or the Jain doctrine, right? So if you take the doctrine introduced by him, there are the Jainism, there are some differences and similarities in between the Jain doctrine and the Buddhism, right? So that is all about the Nigantanatha Putta, right? So I have some more information about those 6 contemporary teachers for your information, right? So you could go through, I will send those extra notes for you, then you could go through them and have a kind of more idea about these 6 heretical teachers and their doctrines, right? Right. So the final contemporary teacher to discuss is the Sanjay Bellati Putta, right? Sanjay Bellati Putta. Earlier also we discussed about the Sanjay Bellati Putta, right? So Sanjay Bellati Putta, according to the Buddhist tradition, Sanjay Bellati Putta, he was the proponent for Ajnanis. Right? So Sanjay Bellati Putta, according to the Buddhist literature, Sanjay Bellati Putta was the former teacher of he was the former teacher of Sariyut and Mugalan. Right? So Sariyut, who are Sariyut and Mugalan? Buddha's 2 chief disciples, right? So when they're looking for truth, they had to go through they had to follow several teachers, right? So Sanjay Bellati Putta could be identified as a former teacher of the Sariputta and Moggallana, or else if we take their lay life, they were called as Upatissa and Kolita. Upatissa and Kolita were the lay names which were used to identify Sariputta and Moggallana, right? So, but they could not find what are they searching for within the Sanjay Bellati Putta, right? So they could not find the truth that they were searching for within the doctrine of the Sanjay Bellati Putta. So they gave up on Sanjay Bellati Putta and went to Buddha, right? So once they understood and once they started following the Buddhism, then Sariputta later on persuaded the Sanjay Bellati Putta to follow Buddha, but he refused following Buddha. But he refused his invitation, refused the invitation made by Sariputta, right? So if we talk about the earlier life of Sanjay Bellati Putta, it is not much clear. It is not, his earlier background is not much clear, except we could say that he was the son of Bellati Putta, or else we could say his family name was Bellati Putta. That's why he was identified as Sanjay Bellati Putta, right? So his earlier life is not available, right? Right. So he resided during the time of Buddha, he resided in Rajagaha. Sanjay Belatiputta resided in, lived in Rajagaha, and he had followers around 2,500 followers within the Rajagaha. He lived in Rajagaha, and he had around 2,500 followers during the time of Buddha. And he claimed that he possessed omniscience, right? So Sanjay Belatiputta claimed that he possessed omniscience. He possessed omniscience, right? So Sanjay Belatiputta was the proponent. He was the founder or the proponent of the school of Ajnanas within India. He was the proponent of school of Ajnanas within the India. Right, so he did not produce any doctrine, and he advocated that it is impossible to gain knowledge of metaphysical nature or the real value of any philosophical proposition. Right, so he mentioned that it is impossible to gain knowledge. It is impossible to gain knowledge regarding the metaphysical nature of the real value or any philosophical proposition, right? So if we take in a simple manner, it is impossible to gain, according to Sanjay Belatiputta, it is impossible to gain any knowledge about the metaphysical nature. And further, he mentioned that even it was possible, even if it is possible to gain the knowledge of the metaphysical nature, it did not contribute to final salvation, right? So at the very beginning, he advocated that it is impossible to gain the knowledge of metaphysical nature. And also he mentions that even though it was possible, right? So it contradicting, right? At the very beginning, he says it is impossible to gain the knowledge of metaphysical nature or the real value of any philosophical proposition. And then he further said that even though it was possible, it does not contribute to final salvation. It does not contribute to final salvation, right? So it is impossible to gain the knowledge, and even though one person gained that specific knowledge about the metaphysical nature, even it did not contribute to final salvation. It did not, the knowledge of the metaphysical nature won't help to attain the final salvation, right? So that is what he mentioned. And what he did was, he kept refusing all the doctrines which of other schools. He kept refusing all the doctrines which were introduced by other teachers and other schools. And further, he did not present his own religion. He did not present his own religion, and what he did was he kept refusing all the religions, right? So that is what he did. That is why they were identified as school of Ajnanis, right? So they didn't mention, or they didn't teach any doctrine to the world, and they did not follow the other teachers. They did not want to believe in other doctrines which were taught by the other teachers as well, right? So therefore they were identified as Ajnanis, right? So, and according to Samannapala Sutta, King Ajasutta has mentioned as follows in his conversation with the Buddha. He was the Ajasutta has mentioned about the Sanjay Belatiputta as he was the most foolish and stupid of all other famous teachers, right? So that is how King Ajasatta identified the Sanjay Belatiputta, right? Because he did not produce a doctrine to the world, and he did not want to believe or follow the other teacher. He kept refusing the other doctrines which were produced by the other teachers as well, right? So therefore, the Sanjay Belatiputta, he was the proponent of the school of Ajnanis, right? So that is the that is all about the Sanjay, Bellati and his religion. Right. So if we take a summary, right, so there are 6 contemporary teachers and doctrines, basically, mainly, right. So there were many more religious beliefs and doctrines during the 6th century BCE. But basically, there were 6 contemporary teachers and religions were there to the Buddha, right? So, and among those 6 religions, Buddhism and Jainism remain today. Right? So, according to the Buddhist literature, there is a specific sutta in Digha Nikaya. There is a specific sutta called Brahmajala Sutta. Brahmajala Sutta. Within this sutta, Buddha has discussed and rejected. Buddha has discussed about 62 heretical views prevailed in India at that time. Right. So as I told you, so far, those 6 were the main and major doctrines which were prevailed during the Buddha. But within the Brahmajala Sutta, there were 60 altogether. There were 62 heretical views prevailed at that time. The Nikaya Brahmajala, right? So, and in most cases, what happened was, according to the Buddha, within the Brahmajala Sutta, what happened was, many followers, in many cases, many instances, what happened was, many followers became lay followers and monastic disciples of Buddha. The followers of the other religions, the followers of the other contemporary teachers and doctrines, finally, what happened was, they became lay followers and monastic disciples of the Buddhism and Buddha, right? So, as I told you, Buddhism, if you take the present view, Buddhism still there within many countries, right? So with great number of followers. And also among those 6 main contemporary religions which were there within the 6th century BCE, among them, the Jainism, apart from the Buddhism, Jainism is also practiced in India as well as other countries, because we could find the followers of Jainism as well as some Jain temples also we could find in India as well as several countries, right? So that is a quick summary to the contemporary religions to the Buddha, right? So even though we discussed about the 6 were the majority or the main contemporary religions, but within the Brahmajala Sutta, there were small traditions as well. Within the Brahmajala Sutta, within the Digha Nikaya, Buddha mentioned that discussed and rejected 62 heretical views which were prevailed within the India, right? So that is a quick summary to the 6 contemporary teachers and views which were prevailed during the India during the time of Buddha, right? So take a question, take down a question to the about the Nigantanatha Buddha and Sanjay Bellati Buddha. The question is, briefly discuss about following 2 contemporary teachers to the Buddha. Within that question, part 1, Nigantanatha Buddha, part 2, Sanjay Bellati Buddha. Right, so that is the question tonight. Go through the lecture note and I will send you within this week the extra readings of the 6 heretical teachers. Please go through that also, right? So within the class and within the open book assignment, within my lecture notes, I have discussed the main points about those doctrines, right? So with within the extra notes, I have mentioned all the points about those doctrines and the teachers. Please go through the extra notes as well, right? So, right. So that is all about the 6 contemporary teachers. Now, so far we discussed about the basic characteristics about the 6 contemporary religions which were prevailed within the India during the time of Buddha, right? So now we are within our next lecture. Next week we are going to look at the Buddhism, the main characteristics of the Buddhism, right? So because we need to learn about the Buddhism as well. So far we discussed about the major points of the other religions, so other doctrines. Now within our next lecture we will be discussing about the Buddhism, right? So, and after that, Buddhism, and there is a comparison between the Buddhism and Jainism, because those are the 2 majority religions prevailed during the 6th century BCE as well as today, right? So, right. So that is all about tonight. Go through the lecture notes and make sure to answer the questions. And I will send you the extra notes most probably by Thursday. Please go through those extra notes as well, right? So go through the extra notes, and I'm not telling you to remember all the points. Rather, if you could, whenever you have time, go through the extra notes and try to point down the main points, right? Main points, and try to include within your answers those points as well, right? Right. So that is all for tonight, and hope you all know Bhante Devananda is back in Japan now. And his Bhante Devananda's class will also start from that class was on Thursday, right? If I'm not mistaken, right? And Bhante Devananda wanted to know the exact day of class, and that lecture also will start from most probably this week. I have no idea in every Thursday, right? Right. So go through the lecture notes, start studying now, because we have few more months remaining for your exam, right? Start studying, and there may be a change for your summer vacation, because most of the students have requested for a change to the summer vacation. But even though we discussed with the administration, we have not yet came to a decision. Once we decided the exact dates of vacation, I will send you a notice regarding that, right? Right. So that is all for today. If you have any question, then email me. Go through the lecture notes and study well, right? So thank you very much for joining me, and see you on next week, right? Thank you.
Thank you very much. See you.
Thank you very much.